Leftist Podcast. Today is episode 2 on January 4th, 2017. Brand new year. Got a lot to get to, so let's get started. President something or other has been attempting to shore up his legacy with hasty, obstructive maneuvers to box in President-elect Trump. Trump responded by laughing hysterically while looking at the calendar on his desk at Trump Tower. Quote, 16 days. You're not going to box me in. If anyone is going to build a barrier, it's me, and it's going to be huge, unquote. Reporters later asked Trump if he was going to have mercy on the Dreamers, at which point he said, quote, there's no chance. Progressives are done. They're gone. We're going to fix Washington, unquote. Reporter Baloney McBloviation of the New York Times corrected the brash president-elect by saying, Dreamers are the undocumented immigrants who were brought here as children, Mr. Trump, unquote. Trump responded by pulling out his smartphone, launching his Twitter app, and tweeting, quote, the wall just got 10 feet higher, and with a moat for your tears. It's going to be beautiful. It will be the greatest wall. You will be proud, unquote. So, let me just start by saying the media has been awful. They've lost all credibility. They're complete hacks, complete Democrat operatives. The entire landscape of the media is littered with them. The people have been dealing with this pedal-to-the-floor agenda for the last decade, and they're fed up. They're tired of it. Progressives have no brakes, no horns, and no headlights. They're full throttle. They always double down on both policy and cultural issues, and they want perpetual change. They move the goalposts constantly. Their disdain for freedom and liberty comes as natural as any language does to a developing child. Here's the thing, though. They're losing the cultural war. Even with all of the money, all of the power and influence in all facets of society, they run our education, Hollywood, news, HR departments, social media, and culture. Yet, even with all of that, against all odds, God has allowed freedom and liberty to battle back, as it always does. Every single thing outside of the Affordable Care Act can be undone with a pen on day one. Doubling down progressives are the best things that have possibly ever happened to conservatives. They're doubling down on a strategy that has resulted in epic losses in all levels of government for Democrats. That's good news for us conservatives, even if Trump doesn't perfectly align with our values. He's certainly a lot closer than anything they could put forward. While the left has done a lot of damage with the Supreme Court's picks that they've had over the years and the interpretation of the Constitution, and it will possibly be permanent, and it will damage our foundation, but we can still fight back, and it is a fight. Whether you're a willing participant means nothing to the left. They will culturally steamroll you if you decide to concede through submission. So, on the side of freedom news, just going to get started with a few headlines here. Fantastic story. I mean, it's a horrible story, but it has a great ending. A woman in North Carolina, Wilmington, North Carolina, to be exact, fended off a home invader after being bound and gagged in her bedroom. So the intruder went through the house and she freed herself. This intruder had a rap sheet dating back to 1998, littered with felonies such as breaking and entering, burglary, larceny, assault, and I'm sure many more. So fortunately for Kay Dickerson, she had a gun sitting on her Bible in her bedroom. She freed herself, and guess what she did with that gun? She shot the person in the chest, as she should. In fact, here's her quote. And I had a gun sitting on a Bible on my headboard. I jumped up on the bed, grabbed the gun, turned around and just pulled the trigger, unquote. The intruder died from the wound. Fortunately, his reign of terror has ended. Score one for the good guys, or the good gals, I should say. Another story dealing with death yet again. It is an Israeli soldier who has been found guilty of manslaughter. His name is Elor Azaria. He was found guilty of manslaughter in a military court today, stemming from an incident involving a Palestinian aggressor who was shot dead while wounded on the ground. The killing occurred in March of last year, 2016. What makes this story so relevant is that it shows the contrast between how this would be handled if the shoe was on the other foot. Last week, the UN threw Israel under the bus, putting a stop to settlement building inside of their capital, Jerusalem. It was a sickening move by the UN, as well as the US administration. In Palestine, people are given money to murder Jews. It's encouraged. They elect people like Hamas just so things like that will happen. In Israel, on the other hand, they're sentenced for up to 20 years for manslaughter of Palestinian aggressors. To draw moral equivalencies between these two states is to say that terrorism is okay and civilized society must bow to its enemies. Now, this isn't in the news of freedom because I necessarily like that this person was killed, or that, this guy's going to go to prison. I'm just saying, let's use it to draw contrast between these two states, and then use it as ammunition against people who say that they're morally equivalent, because they're not. Who in their right mind believes that the Palestinians would ever condemn their own person, a military member no less, for killing a Jew who was attacking them? Not in a million years. Not in a million years would they allow that to happen. So on the other side of the fence, on the side of tyranny news, the NAACP gets comfy in Senator Sessions' office down in Alabama. So while Senator Sessions was out of office, the NAACP and Alabama NAACP are putting their new Fitbits from Christmas to great use by conducting a sit-in inside the senator's office. They are demanding his nomination be withdrawn, and they don't plan on registering a single step until that happens. Or until, of course, they're arrested, the preferable option. Now, let's fast forward. They were arrested. By the time I got home from work to record this, they had, of course, had been arrested. But let's just get to their point. The NAACP believes that Senator Sessions is a racist, which is an interesting opinion, considering his track record of punishing racists harshly, such as the case of the Klan leader Bernie Hayes being put to death, a penalty Senator Sessions insisted upon. The senator also managed to desegregate several schools in Alabama. Does any of that matter to the NAACP or fellow leftists? Of course not. Once you've been painted in a particular way, nothing can expunge that record, kind of like America's past as a whole. There is no repentance in the eyes of leftists. Allowing repentance would mean their entire narrative falling apart. So, as I said, these people were arrested. I think it was just misdemeanor trespassing charges, and they were released on bond. There was like 6 of them, but I just wanted to point that out, that they're never going to let you off the hook. They're always going to paint you. They don't think you're a racist. They know you're a racist. Nothing will change their mind. Just keep that in mind when you are talking with people on the left, particularly progressives. So let's get right to the Dumb Leftist Comment of the day. This is going to be one of my favorite sessions, or segments, I should say. This comment is coming from an individual who commented on salon.com. So this is a first for you, salon.com, but also not surprising. The username Giacomo007 or Giacomo 007, was responding to someone who said that President Obama had already destroyed his legacy. So here's what Giacomo 007 had to say about it. Quote, "And yet the best president of the past 50 years. Name one who has been better," unquote. So it is the position of Giacomo 007 that President Obama is the number one president, the best president in the past 50 years. So let's just dive into that a little bit. The best president in the last 50? Even if you are a diehard leftist, you have to seriously question this presidency. Was it worth losing over 1,000 seats under his control? He led to the election of Donald Trump, your mortal enemy. Donald Trump had the single highest disapproval rating a candidate has ever had and still been elected. You need to be a high-level incompetent to make that happen. He caused a boom in the firearm industry. The electoral map looks like a Verizon wireless cellular coverage in red. Like, it really does. You should just go Google the electoral map from 2016's election and tell me it doesn't look like the Verizon wireless map. If you erased all voting counties, all red voting counties that is, America would be left looking like an archipelago consisting of about 530,000 square miles, completely fragmented, compared to if you left those red states alone and instead removed all of the blue states like they were a cancer of some kind, you would be left with 3 million square miles of America, and you could drive it all by car and get everywhere pretty much. Who's better than him in the last 50 years? My answer would probably be close to all of them. If I would probably go with all of them. Jimmy Carter is likely celebrating that he lived such a long life to be able to fall down a spot. So let's look at the last 8 years and tell me if this is the track record of someone who was the greatest president in the past half century. So, bullet 1. Lost a war we already won, spawning ISIS, who now terrorizes the entire world one massacre at a time, which tend to take place on a weekly or even more frequent basis. Bullet 2. A deal with Iran was made, enabling them to streamline a path to nuclear power while simultaneously giving them enormous amounts of cash to use for exporting terrorism. It sparked what will be known as a nuclear arms race in a region run by religious fanatics, and not just any religious fanatics, radical Islamist fanatics, the most explosive type. Bullet number 3, stoking the flames of racial tension, even when the cases turn out to be false. Oxygen was given to horribly immoral causes such as Black Lives Matter movement. Division has never been higher, other than perhaps the Civil War. Obviously, that's pretty high, but really, think about it. When has it been higher? Everyone hates each other right now. And even if they don't hate each other, they aren't willing to compromise because they are just that divided. Bullet number 4, doubling the national debt. This can't be overstated. The national debt doubled the entire history of the debt in the United States in the span of time a 5th grader needs to enroll in college. That's a very short period of time to just double the entire history of debt. Bullet number 5. Bolstering and supporting illegal immigration at insane levels. Supporting sanctuary cities to disobey federal law. Those are pretty big ones to some people. Either way, it's not really that legal. All right, so next up. Bullet 6 is the escalated tensions with Russia, while simultaneously rolling over dead when they force their will on the world. So, I just can't help but look at the hypocrisy of it. Russia invades Crimea. It's like, okay, just stop, please. Russia helps Assad after we draw a line in the sand, and it's kind of like, whatever. But then, like, Podesta opens a phishing email that, a 15-year-old hacker who drinks Mountain Dew in their parents' basement could lure him into clicking on, and boom, we got Cold War 2.0 again. Like, I don't quite understand that. So these things alone would relegate him to a very low ranking on the list of the best presidents in the last 100 years, let alone the last 50. So let's evaluate the 5 traits, as I like to do, for the leftist commenter, and see what one this one fell into. Hysteria. I don't know. This wasn't a very hysterical comment. Maybe just because it was so concise. Blaming Republicans. I don't think he was necessarily blaming Republicans on this one, so I'll give him a pass on that too. Victimization. I didn't sense any victimization here. He just thinks the president is the best president ever, so pass there. Character attacks. Negative on that as well. Shocking, but negative. And lack of evidence, finally. That's for sure a check here. He blindly claims that the president is the best ever and calls on others to disprove that fact, but that's not how it works. If you're going to imply he's better than all of the last, like, say, 8 to 10 presidents, you need evidence to support that claim, especially when he's been very, very polarizing, to say the least. So there's that. I got a new segment I'd like to inject into this show. It's called Leftists Infect Everything. So what have they infected now? Well, since they already infected everything, this probably isn't too shocking, but we're digging them up. I'm helping dig them up. We're gonna find them all. We're gonna eradicate this infection. So, does anyone remember the days of National Geographic simply being the magazine that had all the relatively undocumented tribes with shirtless women and pictures of beautiful mountains and breathtaking locations around the globe? In case you're arriving late to the scene, leftism has infected literally everything and it's completely overwhelmed everything it touches, preventing from even thinking outside of a very narrow field of view, a field of view that is pretty far extreme over on the left side, known as progressivism. So today, National Geographic is parading around a 9-year-old boy who believes he's a girl, putting child abuse on full display. The parents who cater to this delusional mental illness are similarly infected with progressivism, and National Geographic is complicit in this abuse. Their January issue features the headline, Gender Revolution. So what exactly does this revolution entail? For starters, it involves a lot more than telling a boy that he's a girl. It involves permanent sterilization as early as the age of 11, according to Dr. Michelle Cretella. She is the president of the American College of Pediatricians. Got a little bit of credibility there. So not only is this unnatural and wrong, it is also potentially deadly. To continue with this delusion or facade, transition boys must continue to take cross-sex hormones for the remainder of their life. This puts these children, and I want to emphasize children, quote, at risk for stroke, heart disease, diabetes, cancers, and more, unquote, says Dr. Cretella. She argues that this is institutionalized child abuse. And it's hard to argue against that. Biology is not on the side of the transgender revolution. She says, quote, when a child under the age of 12 thinks that they're the opposite sex and is allowed to naturally pass through puberty, 75 to 95% of the time, that child will accept his or her biological sex by the late teen years, unquote. So we're talking 75 to 95% of the time, the wrinkles are ironed out. Yet these progressives are indoctrinating the public to think it's normal to cater to this delusion. This is gross stuff here. Shame on National Geographic and progressives for this. You have to hand it to them, though. They find a way to infect everything. It won't end here if we allow it. Has anyone heard of the transabled people? They're healthy people who believe that they're born in disabled bodies. They often have this desire to amputate limbs or even sexual organs just so that they feel themselves. Have you ever heard that before on the left? Or maybe with transgenderism? Yeah. Leftism is a scary path. So, next up on enjoying my freedom, just want to talk about some things I'm enjoying. Freedom's great, but it's only great if you take advantage of it. For myself, I've been getting a lot into exercise, even though I tended to do that anyway, but I highly recommend the Viveo Active HR. It's a kind of like a Fitbit, but it has the GPS and heart monitor in it with apps and loads of data to track your progress. I swear I'm not even trying to market them. I just really like it. It's pretty awesome to get an idea of your heart rate and every zone that you're running at, and the GPS trail and all that. I know we have phones for that stuff, but it's cool to just have it on your watch without even having to use your phone. The other thing that I'm really enjoying in my freedom is the new Final Fantasy 15 game on the Xbox. They took kind of a old school game and kind of made it new. The turn-based style is gone. It's a lot more, it's all real time. And I was very skeptical at first. You may not all be video game fans, but you'll hear me talk about random stuff on here, so just bear with me or fast forward if you don't like it. But this game, if you're a fan of RPGs, I highly recommend it. It is way better than I thought it would be, given that the real-time element is relatively new for games of this nature, like Japanese RPGs. So that's it for today. I'm gonna cut it a little short. I kind of ran through it pretty fast. Thanks again for tuning in while I get this podcast rolling. As always, thank you for valuing freedom and liberty. Thank you for being a cultural warrior, willing to embrace the challenges ahead that are there, always in the way of freedom. Come back tomorrow evening for Thursday's podcast, episode 3, the final podcast before the first weekend of the year. Keep your head low. Progressives are always on the attack. This has been your January 4th Freedom Fix.